You actually went there. You crossed the line they thought you would never cross. Not out of anger, not to prove yourself, but because you finally realized you were done living according to everyone else's expectations. And now, people are looking at you differently. Some are confused, some are impressed, some are uncomfortable. But here's the truth. You didn't change to make them see you differently. You changed because you finally saw yourself clearly. And once you stop asking for permission to become who you were meant to be, the entire room feels different when you walk in. There comes a moment when you realize the life you have been living is built around avoiding reactions. You stayed quiet because you didn't want conflict. You held yourself back because you didn't want people judging you. You accepted less because you didn't want to disappoint anyone. You kept explaining yourself because you were afraid someone might misunderstand your intentions. But eventually, something inside you reaches a limit. Not a loud limit, not an explosive limit. A quiet one. A moment where you look at your life and realize, I cannot keep betraying myself just to keep everyone else comfortable. And that is when you finally break the pattern. You make the decision you have been afraid to make. You stop answering every message immediately. You stop chasing people who keep pulling away. You stop accepting disrespect just because you are afraid of being called difficult. You stop saying yes when every part of you is screaming no. You stop shrinking your personality, your ambition, your standards, and your dreams just so other people can remain comfortable around you. And suddenly, people notice. They may not understand what changed, but they can feel that something changed. Your energy is different. Your reactions are different. Your priorities are different. The person who once needed approval now moves with certainty. The person who once explained everything now lets action speak. The person who once feared losing people now understands that losing yourself is far more expensive. That transformation can make people uncomfortable. Why? Because people become accustomed to the version of you they have learned to control. They know what buttons to push. They know how you react when they ignore you. They know you will eventually apologize. They know you will come back. They know you will compromise. But when you stop responding according to the old script, suddenly they don't know what to do with you. And that's where your freedom begins. You don't need to announce your transformation. You don't need to post a dramatic statement saying you have changed. You don't need to confront everyone from your past and explain why you are different now. Your behavior will explain everything. You simply move differently. You walk away without creating a scene. You say no without writing an essay about why. You protect your time without feeling guilty. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to prove that your heart is good to people who have already decided to see you negatively. That is not weakness. That is maturity. There was a time when you thought strength meant fighting every battle. Now you understand that strength also means knowing which battles are beneath your attention. There was a time when you thought confidence meant being loud. Now that real confidence can be quiet. It can look like walking into a room without needing everyone to notice you. It can look like leaving a conversation without needing the final word. It can look like choosing peace when chaos is available. You finally understand something powerful. You were never required to remain the same person just because other people became comfortable with that version of you. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to raise your standards. You are allowed to become difficult to manipulate. And when you do, people will look at you differently. Let them. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to keep becoming the person you know you can be. Because the moment you stop living to protect everyone else's comfort is the moment you finally start living for yourself. There was a time when you believed you had to explain yourself to be understood. If someone misunderstood your intentions, you rushed to correct them. If someone accused you of something you didn't do, you immediately defended yourself. If someone pulled away, you chased after them looking for answers. You thought that if you could just find the right words, Everyone would finally see your heart, understand your intentions, and recognize the truth. But then something changed. You realized that not every misunderstanding deserves your explanation, and not every accusation deserves your energy. Your silence started speaking louder than your words. At first, silence may feel uncomfortable. You may feel like you're losing control of the situation because you're not responding. You may wonder what people are thinking. You may worry that someone will tell their version of the story, and you won't be there to correct it. But eventually, you discover something liberating. You don't have to control every narrative. People are going to believe what they want to believe. And once you accept that, you become free. You stop running behind people, trying to convince them that you're a good person. You stop arguing with people who have already decided to misunderstand you. You stop giving long explanations to people who aren't genuinely interested in understanding you. You realize that sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. That doesn't mean you are afraid. It means you are disciplined. Anyone can react when they are angry. Anyone can send the message they will regret later. Anyone can make a dramatic speech when their emotions are high. But it takes real strength to pause, breathe, observe, and decide that your peace is worth more than winning an argument. Your silence becomes powerful because it shows that you are no longer controlled by every stimulus around you. Someone tries to provoke you, and you remain calm. Someone tries to gossip about you, and you keep building. Someone tries to make you jealous, and you don't participate. Someone expects you to chase them, and you continue walking. That kind of composure changes the way people see you. They begin wondering what happened. Why aren't you reacting? Why aren't you explaining? Why don't you seem desperate anymore? The answer is simple. You finally realize that your actions will eventually reveal what your words never could. You don't need to tell you're focused when they can see your progress. You don't need to tell people you're confident when your decisions demonstrate it. You don't need to tell people you've moved on when your life clearly shows that you're no longer standing in the same place. And here's the beautiful part. Your silence creates space for truth to reveal itself. When you stop interfering with every situation, people expose themselves. When you stop interrupting every rumor, you discover who spreads it. When you stop chasing someone, you discover whether they actually valued your presence. When you stop defending yourself against every accusation, you discover who trusts you and who never intended to. Silence becomes a filter. It separates those who genuinely understand you from those who only enjoyed having access to your reactions. So, don't be afraid when people misunderstand your silence. Don't rush to fill every uncomfortable space with explanations. Let your consistency speak. Let your character speak. Let your results speak. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't need to answer every person who calls your name. You don't need to prove yourself to people committed to seeing you through an outdated version of you. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply continuing forward. And one day, the people who were waiting for you to react will realize something they never expected. You weren't ignoring them because you had nothing to say. You were silent because you finally understood that your peace was worth more than being understood by everyone. One of the clearest signs that you are changing is that what used to impress you no longer has the same power over you. The things that once made you chase attention, seek approval, or tolerate disrespect suddenly begin to look completely different. You start asking yourself a new question. Does this actually deserve access to my time, my energy, and my peace? And that question changes everything. Your standards begin to rise. You stop confusing attention with connection. You stop believing that someone giving you occasional attention automatically means they value you. You stop accepting inconsistency simply because you are afraid that asking for more will make you lose them. You stop calling chaos passion and stop calling emotional exhaustion love. You begin to recognize that peace is not boring. Peace is powerful, and when your standards change, your choices change. You become more selective about the conversations you participate in. You become careful about who gets access to your personal life. You stop telling everyone your plans. You stop seeking validation from people who have never understood your vision. You begin protecting your goals because you realize that not everybody deserves to know what you're building before it exists. This is where people start looking at you differently. They remember the version of you who was always available, the version who answered every call, responded to every message, explained every decision, and gave people chance after chance. They remember someone who would tolerate uncomfortable situations just to keep the peace. But now you're different. You can care about someone and still say no. You can forgive someone and still keep your distance. You can love someone and still recognize that they are not healthy for your future. You can wish someone well without inviting them back into your life. That level of emotional discipline confuses people who were used to having unlimited access to you. But understand this. Raising your standards doesn't mean believing you're better than everyone else. It means finally understanding that your life has value. Your time has value. Your attention has value. Your energy has value. And if you don't protect those things, someone else will gladly consume them without considering what they cost you. Maybe your biggest transformation isn't that you became more confident. Maybe it's that you became less desperate. You are no longer desperate to be chosen. You are no longer desperate to be included. You are no longer desperate to prove that you belong in rooms that were never designed for your growth. You start choosing environments where you can breathe. You choose relationships where respect is mutual. You choose opportunities that align with your values. You choose silence over unnecessary conflict. You choose progress over popularity. And that choice creates a different kind of presence. People can feel when someone no longer needs their approval. You walk differently because you aren't constantly checking whether everyone around you approves of your direction. You speak differently because you aren't afraid that one disagreement will destroy your identity. You move differently because you finally understand that rejection is not always a loss. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes losing access to someone is exactly what gives you access to yourself. And this is why you shouldn't feel guilty when people notice your boundaries. Let them notice. Let them wonder why you don't tolerate what you used to tolerate. Let them wonder why you stopped chasing. Let them wonder why you're suddenly selective. You don't owe anyone the old version of yourself. Your standards are not an attack on other people. They are a commitment to the person you are becoming. And once you make that commitment, don't break it just because someone becomes uncomfortable. Because the moment you lower your standards to keep someone close, you teach yourself that their comfort matters more than your growth. Never do that again. You didn't raise your standards because you became cold. You raised them because you finally learned your worth. And when you truly understand your worth, you stop begging people to recognize it. You simply live according to it. This is the part nobody expected. They thought your transformation would make you louder, more aggressive, more desperate to prove yourself. They expected you to become obsessed with showing everyone that they were wrong. But instead, something completely different happened. You became calmer. You became more focused. You became harder to provoke. You stopped performing for an audience that was never going to give you the approval you wanted. You didn't become someone new. You became more of yourself. The version of you that people remember was shaped by fear, pressure, disappointment, and the constant need to survive. You learned how to adapt. You learned how to keep people happy. You learned how to hide certain parts of yourself because you thought being completely authentic would make people leave. You became familiar with shrinking yourself because it felt safer than standing fully in your own power. But eventually, you realized that safety and fulfillment are not always the same thing. You can be accepted by everyone and still feel completely disconnected from yourself. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. You can make everyone comfortable and still be miserable. And that's when you decided that you would rather risk being misunderstood than continue abandoning yourself. That decision changed your entire presence. You don't walk into rooms looking for approval anymore. You don't scan people's faces wondering whether they like you. You don't measure your worth by how quickly someone responds to you. You don't panic when someone walks away. You understand now that not everyone is supposed to stay. Some people were connected to an older version of you. When that version disappeared, the connection disappeared too. And that's okay. Growth has a price. Sometimes the price is being misunderstood. Sometimes it's being called distant when you're simply protecting your peace. Sometimes it's being called arrogant when you're finally confident. Sometimes it's being called selfish because you stopped sacrificing yourself for everyone else. But you know the difference. You know what it took to become this person. You remember the nights when you questioned yourself. You remember the moments when you almost gave up. You remember how many times you put your own needs aside just to keep someone else happy. That's why you don't need anyone else to validate your transformation. You were there when you rebuilt yourself. You were there when nobody saw the struggle. You were there when you had to motivate yourself through moments when motivation didn't exist. And now that you're standing stronger, you don't need to explain the construction process to people who only notice the finished building. Let them see what they see. You have work to do. Your future requires your attention. Your goals require consistency. Your peace requires protection. Your growth requires discipline. And your new life cannot be built while you're constantly returning to defend yourself against the opinions of people committed to misunderstanding you. So, keep moving, keep becoming, keep choosing yourself. Not because you hate anyone, but because you finally understand that your life is your responsibility. You don't need revenge. You don't need to make anyone jealous. You don't need to prove that you succeeded. Your success will become its own answer. Your discipline will become its own explanation. Your peace will become its own victory. One day, people will look at you and realize that the person they thought they knew is gone. And they may wonder when it happened. They may search for the exact moment you changed. But you will know the truth. It wasn't one moment. It was every time you chose yourself when it was difficult. Every time you walked away instead of begging. Every time you stayed silent instead of reacting. Every time you continued after disappointment. Every time you refused to return to an environment that required you to become smaller. That's how you became unrecognizable. Not because you became someone else, because you finally became the person you were always capable of being. So, if everyone is looking at you differently now, don't panic. Don't go backward just to make them comfortable. Don't resurrect the old version of yourself just because someone misses having access to it. Keep walking. The person you are becoming needs more attention than the people who are confused by your transformation. You didn't change to impress them. You changed because you finally realized you were worth the effort. And now that you know that, never forget it.